Welcome to Learn Spring Security, and welcome to the first lesson in Module 1, Intro to Spring Security. This is of course going to be a first module, but also an introduction to the entire course. So let's get into it. We are of course going to start from the basics, and we're going to talk about what Spring Security is and what it brings to the table. We are then going to go briefly over the material that we're going to cover in this starter class. We're going to have a look at the code, and then we're going to get practical and we're actually going to run the project. Okay, so what is Spring Security? At a very simple level, Spring Security is a framework that's built on top of Spring and that is providing security features for securing our applications. That's pretty much the goal of the framework, and that is what Spring Security is trying to do in the Java ecosystem. So with that in mind, let's have a look at what we're going to be covering in the starter class. In Module 1, we're going to secure a simple Spring MVC application. In the second module, we're going to do a full registration flow. We're going to set that up for our MVC application, the one that we developed in Module 1. In Module 3, we're going to do Remember Me, and we're going to be looking at the intricacies and the various ways to implement Remember Me, because there's definitely more than one way to do it. In Module 4, we're going to have a look at Spring Security on the client. So that basically means Thymeleaf and JSP. And of course, you can apply the concepts in here to many other templating languages, but we are going to focus on Thymeleaf for the most part and JSP to a lesser extent. And in Module 5, we're going to explore Spring Security expressions. The Spring Security expression support is pretty flexible, and so we have a lot of options to leverage with those expressions. Alright, so that is a very high-level run through the starter class of the course. So let's now talk about the code and the project. First of all, the project code is going to be hosted on GitHub. It's going to be a public repository that you can simply clone and work from. Within that GitHub project, you'll see that each of the modules of the course has a separate branch. So you'll see branches named Module 1, Module 2, and so on, of course corresponding to each module of the course. And within those modules, within those branches, you'll see the lessons. So basically each lesson is going to get a separate directory, and that is simply so that when you start a lesson, you can simply import the lesson project in your IDE and you have a clear place to start from. Now, if you're developing along with the course material, you're going to see that when you're done working through the code of a lesson, you should be exactly at the point of the next lesson code. So that means that if you want to skip, for example, going through a lesson, or if you just want to listen to the video and you really don't want to actually develop that particular lesson in your IDE, you will be able to simply import the next lesson and just start from there. Okay, and now for the interesting part, what are the goals of this course? I always set out big goals for my material, and of course especially the Learn Spring Security course, because this is really the most ambitious and the largest course that I ever produced. So of course I have some big goals behind it. But I'm going to keep things simple, and I'm just going to say that the goal of the Learn Spring Security course is to give you a full security education if you're doing Java work. Now that's a simple goal, but it's super ambitious, and I know the course is going to deliver on that. When you're done going through the starter, the intermediate, and the master class of the course, you should be able to tackle most of these day-to-day security challenges, and you should also have the understanding to build on this material. Whenever you're implementing an advanced scenario that was not covered in the course, you should have all of this course material to fall back on and build that scenario on a solid base. Build that scenario on an understanding of the overall security ecosystem in Java. Alright, so let's now have a very quick look at importing the project and running it. Notice that I'm using Eclipse as my main IDE for this course. This is Eclipse STS, and if you're going to be using Eclipse, I fully recommend getting the Eclipse STS distribution and using this. So let's now actually import the first lesson of this project and let's start looking at the code. Okay, so here we go. First of all, you'll notice that the name of the project is Learn Spring Security M1L1. This means Module 1, Lesson 1. You'll also see that Spring STS recognizes that this is a boot project and that we have DevTools installed. And this is of course only for development purposes, and I'll touch on what DevTools is later on in the course. Okay, so let's open it up and let's check out the structure. And you can immediately see just how simple this project is. It's a bare bones Maven project with not a lot of functionality. This is going to be the package structure. We're going to be using com.bildung.lss. And so right off the bat, this is the main Spring Boot application that we are going to be running. Now, of course, if you're not using Boot, you can always configure this project to be deployable as a standard WAR, as a standard Java web project, so that's perfectly fine, but we are going to be using Boot just because of the simplicity and ease of deployment. And again, 99% of the course code is not Boot related. You can definitely use things without necessarily using Boot, but as you're following along through the course material, you should use Boot and you should be deploying in the same way that I will be deploying. We're going to run this Boot application. And there we go. That is pretty much it. We have now run the Boot application and we should be able to hit localhost 8080 and we should be able to access the application. We're not going to be doing that right now because we'll have a look at the application in the next lesson. So what are the takeaways of this module? Well, first of all, we established the lofty goal of Learn Spring Security. We had a high-level pass over what the starter class is going to contain. And we dove into the code and really finished strong by running it. Alright, hope you're excited. See you in the next one.